because this weekend. Right. Right.
Report I was working on all weekend. I didn't have time to be looking at this. I mean, I did, but I just didn't.
Do we have anything to do coming up?
Not really. We've just been going over reproductive and
I know I was saying 10 points, but I'm only going to be like 20.
So they can go over those questions with you. Questions are going to be repeated the other time on your exam. So this is this time, so we figure out that the two clients so far in the period were covered. Alright, so this is for you to test yourself, to test how do you do. Alright, that's why I don't put a lot of points on those quizzes. They will be part of your participation, those 100 points towards the participation, and then this goes for 10 points towards this grade. Alright, so first thing is going to be the speed, statistic, and recovery. If you remember, we do have two tunics and scrotum. See the tunica, the white tunica, called the tunica albumina. You can please do last one on the floor.
Just the last one.
Yes. You remember, we did have tunica albumina. We had another layer, another covering formed of two layers. This is my tunica vaginalis. And to the outside, we did have the skin pouch with the muscle inside. This is the scrotum. Scrotum. So we've got three coverings again: tunica albuginea, tunica vaginalis, and the scrotum. Those are the three testicular coverings I was asking about. Next question, site for spermatogenesis. If you remember, the spermatogenesis is taking place in the testes. And if you remember, what specific part of the testis is in the seminephros tubules. So the good answer here is going to be the seminephros tubules. Sperm-carrying ducts, if you remember, we started from the seminephros tubules. This is where I will be producing the sperms. This is where I have the circulatory or sustentacular cells that will be producing the fluid through which the sperm is going to be circulating. And the sperm is going to be conducted to this network of ducts first. This is my 3D testis.
then I will pass through the vas ductus. This is where I will meet with duct up in the pelvis, just below the urinary bladder. This is called the seminal vesicle, as we're going to see in a second. And the duct of the seminal vesicle with the vas deferens will form the ejaculatory duct. Ejaculatory duct will conduct the semen to the part of the urethra having in the prostate gland. What did we call this part? Prostatic urethra. And then prostatic urethra will pass to the outside. This would be called my membranous or intermediate urethra. And then membranous urethra is going to be traveling to the inside of the penis. This is what we call the penile or the spongy urethra. That would be conducting the semen to the outside through the external urethral pores. This is those are the sperm carrying ducts starting from the seminephros tubules to the epididymis to the vas deferens to the ejaculatory duct, the prostatic urethra, membranous urethra, penile urethra.
For those questions, you were only asking for 5, but you just named a lot more than 5.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. So if you mention any 5 of them in a correct order, you're gonna get those scores. All right. Moving on to the next question. 3 layers of the wall of the uterus. If you remember, we do have a layer around the uterus. This is what we call something related to the uterus. Can you remind me? Around and related to the uterus is metrium. We have the outside layer of the uterus. This is my perimetrium. And then we had deeper to the perimetrium, we have the muscle layer, something related to the muscle is myelin, and related to the uterus is metrium. And to the inside, the lining of the uterus is endo. So we've got the inside of the uterus, endometrium. 3 parts of the uterus that we mentioned last time. Those were the dome-shaped part. This is called the fundus. The mid-portion body, and the part of the uterus that travels down into the vaginal canal. This is called the cervix. 3 different parts of the uterus. Those were the fundus, the dome-shaped part. The big portion is the body of the uterus, and the part of the uterus that travels down in the vagina. This is what we call the cervix. Remember, when we see the internal reproductive organs of the female reproductive system, we see different parts of the fallopian tube. Remember those finger-like projections first. Those are like fingering. And then we have the entrance. This is called my infundibulum. And then we have this bulging part of the fallopian tube. This is my ampulla. and we have the junction between the cavity of the tube with the junction with the cavity of the endometrium. This was my isthmus. Questions? So again, we have the fimbriae, we have the infundibulum, we have this bulging part, this is my antenna, and we have the junction between the tube and the uterus. This is the isthmus. Can you remind me what is the normal site of fertilization? Antula of the fallopian tube. Antula is the normal site of fertilization. Three different glands that were related here to the male reproductive system. You can see this first one. This is my seminal vesicle. We've got this one that will be surrounding the ejaculatory duct and part of the urethra. This is my prostate gland. We've got a third one, a tiny one, that will be located at the entrance of the urethra in the penis. This is my vulval urethral gland. Need to remember, another name for it is Cooper's gland. We've got three glands related to the male reproductive system. First one is the seminal vesicle. Second one is the prostate gland. And the third one is my vulval urethral gland. Three different parts of the broad ligament. If you remember, what is the broad ligament that we've seen last time? This is a sheet-like ligament that will be surrounding the fallopian tube, the ovary, and the uterus. What are the different parts? The parts that will be surrounding the fallopian tube, this will be my mesosalpinx. Something related to the fallopian tube is salpinx. So mesosalpinx is a membrane around the fallopian tube. Mesosalpinx. And remember that the part of the broad ligament that will be surrounding the ovary, this is my mesovarium. Mesovarium. And the part that will be surrounding the uterus, some meso, and related to the uterus is metrium. Mesometrium, this is the part of the broad ligament that will be surrounding the uterus. Easy? Right, so again, this information will be heavily tested over and over. So please make sure you cover the material as soon as we discuss them in class. Or the material will build up and you won't have time a day or two before your test. This is a big exam. Actually, this was the very last exam that we had, but I did move it forward in the course for you to have enough time to study for it. It used to be the last unit in the course. Alright? Any questions concerning this part? This part, straightforward information. You just need to review them. Questions? Very, very important to gain test yourself. oogenesis last time, and if you remember, the oogenesis is a formation from a mature egg, and we usually start with an oogonium. Remember oogonium? Going to be transformed by a mitotic division into a primary oocyte. And remember, the primary oocyte can be transformed into secondary oocyte by completing the first cell division of meiosis, meiosis 1. Completing meiosis 2 to the secondary oocyte is going to become a mature egg. This is what we call the ovum. This is the one that will have the ability to replicate at a very high speed, being able to integrate the genetic material of the sperm with its own genetic material to form the very first cell that will be proliferating into space. Remember, here I have mitosis. To transform a primary oocyte into secondary oocyte, we did need to pass through meiosis 1. And then we did need to pass through meiosis 2 in order for us to become a mature form. Right. When the mitotic division is going to be taking place, if you remember, during fetal life. So after birth, any female will be able to produce any more of the primary oocytes? No. So I have a limited number of primary oocytes that I will be consuming throughout the fertility period. So if the first menses was at age 11 or 13, let's say, and menopause takes place at 52. So during those 40 years, this is the time where I will be depleting those primary oocytes that I kept in the ovary. What happens to those primary oocytes? Every month, one of them is going to be able to be ovulated. The triggering factor that will make the primary oocyte to become ovulated is the same triggering factor that will enhance the completion of meiosis 1. So, again, primary oocyte will not be complete meiosis 1 until ovulation takes place. Once it's ovulated, the primary site will complete meiosis 1. It's going to become a secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte will not become a mature ovum unless it gets penetrated by a sperm. Once penetrated by sperm, this will be able to complete meiosis 2 and become a mature egg. If no fertilization takes place, would I have any mature egg? No. This is the oogenesis. Those are the steps by which I will be producing a mature egg from the stem cell, my oogonia. Remember, we don't have eggs flowing by themselves in the ovary. We keep those eggs in the form of follicles. And remember, what is a follicle? A follicle is simply speaking an egg surrounded by follicular cells. So primary oocyte during childhood and during puberty. Okay, what is the form that I would keep the primary oocyte in? I would keep it surrounded by one row of fat cells. And we're going to call this is my primary those primordial follicles kept in the ovary each month. What's going to happen? The hypothalamus is going to be releasing gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. GnRH stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH and LH. Who's taking the upper hand first is the follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. Follicle stimulating hormone is going to be doing what? It's going to be stimulating the follicle for it to become a mature follicle. Each month, some of the primordial follicles will start their maturation process, but only one of them will become a mature follicle. Primordial follicle will start to grow. The follicular cells will become cuboidal rather than flat. What happens to the egg when the follicle starts to become mature? When I form a primary follicle, what's going to happen to the egg inside? Primary oocyte inside the primordial follicle. What's going to happen to it when it becomes a primary follicle? Nothing. Alright? Why? Primary oocyte will not become a secondary oocyte until it becomes ovulated. So here, I am stimulating the follicular cells to grow. Flat cells will become cuboidal cells. What do we call this follicle? This is my primary follicle. Primary follicle will become secondary follicle. What's the difference between the secondary follicle and the primary follicle? You see on here, the primary oocyte is going to be surrounded by more than one layer of cuboidal and columnar cells. What do we call this follicle in which I am surrounding the primary oocyte by multiple layers of follicular cells? This is my secondary follicle. Is this mature? Not yet. Not yet. The primary is a secondary follicle, now will become a mature follicle. What do we call the mature follicle? Another name for it is going to be Graafian follicle. What kind of egg do I have in the Graafian follicle? I still have primary oocytes. Nothing can happen to the egg yet. How the mature follicle or the Graafian follicle is going to look like? I have multiple cell layers, and those cells will form together space filled by fluid. This is called the antrum. What is the main characteristic of this mature follicle or the Graafian follicle? Is that the Graafian follicle here releases large amounts of estrogen. Estrogen here is the ovarian hormone that you're going to be releasing from those growing follicles. All the growing follicles here are releasing estrogen. The mature follicle here releases large amounts of estrogen, which will have a positive feedback on your hypothalamus. So what do I release in response to this large amounts of estrogen? Hypothalamus is going to be activated, will start to release larger amounts of GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, which will stimulate the pituitary gland to release another pituitary hormone. This is my LH. I will be releasing large amounts of LH, and we call this, if you remember, this is my LH surge. LH surge. What is the action here of the LH surge? It will stimulate the Graafian follicle to, boom, rupture. And when it ruptures, what's going to happen? You're going to be releasing the egg. The release of the egg from the follicle. This is what we call ovulation. So the first effect of the LH surge on the Graafian follicle is ovulation. Ovulation will take place. And remember, during the ovulation, what's going to happen? Primary oocyte will complete meiosis 1 to become a secondary oocyte. So what kind of egg do I have in here? Once ovulated, I have secondary oocyte. And this is another effect of the LH surge. LH is the triggering factor that will enhance the primary oocyte to become a secondary oocyte. LH surge will enhance the maturation of a primary oocyte into a secondary oocyte. The third effect of the LH surge is going to be the transformation of those surrounding cells. Those are my follicular cells on here. So the remaining follicular cells, after ovulation takes place, it's going to be transformed into a yellow body. We call it the corpus luteum. Again. What happens? What happens to the egg and the follicle? Normally, what kind of follicles do I have in the ovary? I have primordial follicles. Each month, what's going to happen? Hypothalamus releases GnRH, stimulates the pituitary gland to release FSH. FSH, from its name, it stimulates what? Stimulates follicles. What follicle do I have? Primordial. Some of the primordial follicles will start to become mature. Only one of them will become a Graafian follicle. Only one of them will become mature every month. Those growing follicles, primordial, will become primary. Do I have any change in the egg inside the follicle? No. Primary will become secondary. Do I have any change in the egg inside the follicle? No. Secondary will become a mature or Graafian follicle. Do I have any change in the egg inside the follicle? Graafian follicle? Yes or no? I still have primary oocyte in all those follicles. This growing follicle, those growing follicles are releasing what ovarian hormone? Estrogen. What if there is no fertilization? If there is no fertilization of this egg is going to be broken down, and the corpus luteum is going to be kept in the ovary for 14 days. And this time, this period, is going to be constant in all females. All females will have corpus luteum every month that will remain for 14 days. What this corpus luteum is going to be responsible of? It's going to be responsible for the secretion of another ovarian hormone. This is the hormone that we will call the progesterone. Pro means it precedes, it comes before, and gestation means pregnancy. So every month, I will be releasing a hormone that will be expecting a pregnancy to take place, as we're going to see in a second. I'm releasing progesterone. Do you expect to have pregnancy if there is no ovulation? No. So actually, once the follicle ruptures, releasing the egg, ovulation takes place, and now I have liberated the egg. Now fertilization might take place, and I might have pregnancy. So at this point only, I will be releasing the progesterone. And this is what's wrong if I have polycystic ovary, or the Graafian follicle doesn't rupture, form a cyst. And then next month, I form another cyst. I'm not able to rupture. And another cyst. Why cyst? Why it's cystic? Because you remember, I have fluid inside the Graafian follicle. I have fluid, so I form a cyst. And I will have accumulation of the estrogen, which will be transformed into the male sex hormone. So polycystic ovary, I will have hirsutism as one of its signs. I will have, of course, infertility because of the anovulation. I'm not performing any ovulation. And of course, I will have amenorrhea. Amenorrhea or oligomenorrhea means I have disturbed menstrual cycle. As we're going to see, how is this going to be reflected on the uterus in a second. So again, normally, what happens in the ovary? Ovary has what kind of follicles? What kind of follicles again? Primordial follicles. And what is the shape of the primordial follicle? What do I have forming the primordial follicle? I have a primary oocyte that I'm born with them. I have limited number of them. And those primary oocytes are surrounded by one row of flat cells. This is called altogether primordial follicle. Each month, what's going to happen? What's this part? Hypothalamus releases GnRH that will stimulate what gland? And pituitary gland to release FSH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and this was the first action of this hormone that we've discovered. That's why we call it like this. We discovered that it stimulates the follicle, so we called it follicle stimulating hormone. And we kept the name. We find out that the same hormone is going to be present in males, but we don't have follicles in males. Alright, so what's going to happen to the primordial follicle? This one that has been chosen to become a mature egg, it's going to become primary follicle. Primary follicle will become secondary follicle. Secondary will become mature or Graafian follicle. Mature follicle and the growing follicles here, all those growing follicles are releasing what ovarian hormone? Estrogen. Who will be releasing large amounts of estrogen? Mature follicle. Under the effect of this large amount of the estrogen level that I will be producing here, once I get the mature follicle, this will cause a positive or negative feedback? Positive feedback. I am stimulating the hypothalamus, I'm stimulating the anterior pituitary gland, and as I get that much stimulation, I will be releasing more of what hormone? LH. And this sudden rise of the LH, responsible for all the mid-cyclic changes taking place in the ovary, this sudden rise of the LH is what we call the LH surge. Three results. Three things that will take place under the effect of the LH surge. First one is ovulation. And during ovulation, what else are you stimulating? You're stimulating the primary to become secondary by completing what kind of division? Meiosis 1. I will allow primary oocyte to become a secondary oocyte by allowing it to complete meiosis 1. Clear? Okay. What else is going to happen to the remaining parts of the core of the radiant follicle or the mature follicle, the remaining follicular cells will form a yellow body. What do we call it? Corpus luteum. Let's check how those changes gonna be reflected on the endometrium. What is the endometrium that we just mentioned? The internal lining of the uterus. You remember, outside to the inside, the wall of the uterus is divided into. Then we have the muscle layers. This is my here, and to the inside we have endometrium. So we're looking here only at the endometrium. So I did look at the internal lining of the uterine wall, and I'm looking here at the endometrium. So I have the thin layer of the endometrium. Can you see it? No, neither me. Alright, don't worry. Alright, this is the layer that will be proliferating. Alright? This is called my stratum. Here. So you should have better imagination. So this is the endometrial lining. All this. We have the very thin layer at the bottom. This is called my stratum basal. Stratum means layer. Stratum is layer. So we have, this is my stratum basal. Or my basal layer. What happens under the effect of the estrogen? The stratum basal will start to proliferate, and it will form another layer that will be affected by the ovarian hormones. This is my stratum functionalis, or the functional layer. So what happens to the stratum functionalis? It will start to proliferate. In response to what? In response to my estrogen. What do you proliferate inside the stratum functionalis? You're going to be building up blood vessels. You're going to be building up glands. You're going to be adding receptors on those glands to respond to the hormones that will be coming up. These are my progesterone receptors. So again, what happens to the internal lining of the endometrium? You have a layer at the base. This is my basal layer. This is where you're going to be proliferating the cells that will form my stratum functionalis. So stratum functionalis is the layer that will be affected by the ovarian hormones. Under the effect of the estrogen released from what? What is producing the estrogen on here are my growing follicles. Those will be producing high estrogen levels, and this will enhance the proliferation of the stratum functionalis of my endometrial lining. During the second half of the cycle, second half of the ovarian cycle, what's going to happen? High levels of estrogen will be causing a positive feedback on my hypothalamus anterior pituitary gland. You're going to have a sudden rise of the LH. LH surge will cause the mature follicle to release the egg to the outside. Ovulation takes place, and what is going to happen to the remaining follicular cells? That will become my corpus luteum. This corpus luteum is going to be releasing again what hormone? Progesterone. And here I am preparing the endometrium for a baby to be implanted, for a fetus to be implanted in. I need to create a favorable medium inside the endometrium for it to accept this baby, for this fertilized egg that has been proliferating, forming the zygote, to be implanted. So what do you need to fill the endometrial lining with? You need to fill the glands with secretions. You need to engorge those blood vessels, those arteries, and fill them with blood. Because those rapidly proliferating cells will need large amounts of secretions, will need large amounts of blood supply for them to be able to divide and replicate themselves. And that's why we're going to call this hormone the hormone that precedes pregnancy. I am creating a favorable medium for this fetus to be implanted. So what do we call this phase under the effect of the estrogen of those growing follicles? This is called my proliferative phase. What I mean by proliferative phase, this is a phase where proliferation of the endometrium, what part of the endometrial lining is going to be proliferating? Stratum functionalis. Under the effect of the progesterone, what's going to happen? You are stimulating the glands to release large amounts of secretions. You are engorging the blood vessels, called the spiral arteries. Engorge them with blood. That's why we're going to call the second phase on here, this is my secretory phase. So again, each month, what's going to happen? Each month, the hypothalamus releases GnRH. GnRH still, don't worry about taking the picture, it's still incomplete. You can add to it. Right? Give you a chance to take pictures before we're done. Alright? So, again, what happens each month? After puberty, hypothalamus releases GnRH. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. This stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH and LH, but who's taking the upper hand in here? FSH. Follicle stimulating hormone is going to be stimulating the follicles in the ovary. What kind of follicles do I have in the ovary? Primordial follicle. Primordial will be stimulated. It will start to become primary follicle. What kind of egg do I have in a primary follicle? I still have primary oocyte. Still have primary oocyte. Primary follicle will become secondary follicle. What kind of egg do I have in the secondary follicle? Primary oocyte. Secondary follicle, still under the effect of FSH, it will become a mature follicle or Graafian follicle. What hormone am I producing by those growing follicles? Ovarian hormone. Yes. Who will be producing large amounts of it? My mature follicle. Mature follicle will be releasing large amounts of estrogen, which will cause a positive feedback on my hypothalamus and anterior pituitary gland. stimulating the pituitary gland to release now another large amounts of what hormone? My LH. This is called my LH surge. This takes place around day 14 of the cycle. That's why we're going to call those here, those events. Those are the mid-cyclic changes. So, what are the mid-cyclic changes that will be taking place under the effect of the LH surge? Ovulation, completion of meiosis 1, transformation of a primary oocyte into secondary oocyte, and the third thing, follicular cells will become my corpus luteum. Corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is going to be producing another type of ovarian hormone. This will be my progesterone. How this will affect the endometrial lining? Again, those growing follicles will be producing estrogen, and the estrogen will be enhancing, stimulating the cells of the stratum basal to proliferate to form the stratum functionalis, which is actually going to be affected by the ovarian hormones. Basal is not affected by the ovarian hormones. Stratum functionalis will start to proliferate. What you're going to be building up in this layer of the endometrium, you're going to be building up vessels, arteries. You're going to be building up glands. That's why we're going to call this phase my proliferative phase. This is where the proliferation is going to be taking place. Also, another effect of the estrogen is going to be to add receptors for the progesterone on those glands. What happens after ovulation takes place? Formation of the corpus luteum. You're going to be producing the progesterone, which is going to have a stimulant effect on those glands and vessels. I will be engorging the blood vessels, spiral arteries, fill them with blood. I will be stimulating the glands to release large amounts of secretions. Why do you increase the blood supply? Why do you increase the amount of secretions produced by those endometrial glands? For me to create a favorable medium for the zygote to be implanted. All right? That's why we call this hormone before gestation. What happens if no fertilization takes place? If no fertilization takes place, the corpus luteum remains in the ovary for how long? 14 days. And this is a constant in all females. What's going to happen after 14 days of the ovulation? The corpus luteum will be broken down. And this progesterone did have a negative feedback on my hypothalamus here. So the progesterone that was produced from the corpus luteum was inhibiting the GnRH and FSH-LH release from the anterior pituitary gland. So what's going to happen when I break down the corpus luteum after 14 days? What's going to happen to the ovarian hormones? Are you producing any more progesterone?
No.
Are you producing any estrogen? No. So I will have a sudden drop in the ovarian hormones. What keeps those cells proliferating, stimulated, are the ovarian hormones. If I have a sudden drop of the ovarian hormones, what's going to happen as a result? I will have shedding of the endometrium. I will not be able to maintain the endometrial lining if I don't have ovarian hormones. So sudden drop of the ovarian hormones, if no fertilization takes place here for this egg, corpus luteum can be broken down after how long? 14 days. And this will result in a sudden drop of the all ovarian hormones. You don't have progesterone, you don't have estrogen, and as a result, I won't be able to maintain the endometrial lining. I will have shedding of the endometrium, and I will have the menstrual flow. So you see on here, This will be the first phase of my menstrual cycle. This is the menstrual, where the menstrual flow takes place. This is the menstrual phase. Drop in the ovarian hormones. Who will notice this drop of the ovarian hormones? Your hypothalamus. Hypothalamus will start to release GnRH to stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH. That will stimulate another primordial follicle to become primary, to become secondary, to become a mature follicle. Those follicles are releasing estrogen, which will stimulate the proliferation of the endometrial lining. What layer of the endometrium will be stimulated? My stratum functionalis. Greater follicle will be releasing large amounts of estrogen, which will have a positive or negative feedback on the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary gland. I have positive feedback, which will stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release what hormone in large amounts? LH, luteinizing hormone. LH surge will be stimulating the greater follicle to rupture, and ovulation takes place. Maturation of the primary to secondary oocyte, and the follicular cells will become the corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is going to be producing what hormone? That precedes gestation, progesterone. This progesterone will be stimulating the stratum functionalis layer and fill the glands with secretions, engorge the spiral arteries of the endometrial lining, fills them with blood for me to create a favorable medium for the implantation to take place. Corpus luteum will remain for how long? Again, for 14 days. What if fertilization didn't take place? I will be breaking down the egg, I will be breaking down the corpus luteum, and remember, progesterone did have what effect on the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary gland? I had a negative feedback. What if I did break down the corpus luteum? Do I have any ovarian hormone? No. So I would have a drop in all the ovarian hormones. You don't have ovarian hormones, so this is not accurate in here. This should start. They shouldn't be overlapped. Drop in the ovarian hormones, what this will result in? Shedding of the endometrial line, causing endometrial or menstrual flow. This would be day 1 of the menstrual cycle. What's going to happen? Due to the drop of those ovarian hormones, who will get stimulated? Hypothalamus to release what? GnRH to stimulate anterior pituitary gland to release FSH. That will stimulate primordial to primary to secondary significant follicle, which will release large amounts of estrogen that will stimulate the GnRH and the LH release from the anterior pituitary gland, releasing LH with large amounts. This is what we call the LH surge. 3 effects here will be ovulation, maturation of primary oocyte to secondary oocyte, and corpus luteum formation. Corpus luteum will be releasing what hormone? Progesterone, which will stimulate the secretions of the glands of the endometrial lining, enhancing the growth of the vessels and engorging them with blood. What happens if no fertilization takes place? Corpus luteum breaks down, drop in the ovarian hormones, shedding of the endometrium, drop in the ovarian hormones will stimulate the hypothalamus to release. That will stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release. That will stimulate the primordial to grow into primary. The secondary to mature follicles, which will release large amounts of, which will have a positive or negative feedback. Which on line. Hypothalamus and pituitary gland to release what hormone? LH. What do we call the sudden rise of LH? 3 effects of LH surge would be corpus luteum formation. Corpus luteum will be releasing what hormone? Progesterone, which will have what effect on the endometrial lining that I've been proliferating and
having engorging the vessels, I'm stimulating the glands to release their secretions, creating a favorable medium for the implantation of the zygote. What happens if no fertilization takes place? You break down corpus luteum. After how long? 14 days. What happens to the ovarian hormones when you break down the corpus luteum, especially when you know that the progesterone they have negative feedback of the hypothalamus? You're going to be having a drop in the ovarian hormones. Drop in the ovarian hormones will cause the shedding of the endometrium. Who will detect it? Hypothalamus. It will get stimulated, releasing. That will stimulate anterior. Release. Stimulate. That becomes what happens? Let's say greater function will be releasing with large amounts, which will have on the hypothalamus anterior pituitary gland. The stimulation will cause surge will cause three effects. Corpus luteum formation. That's going to be for how long? 14 days. Releasing what hormone?
Progesterone.
Progesterone will stimulate what? In the glands to release their secretions, blood vessels to be engorged with blood. This is what we call of the menstrual cycle. This is my secretary. What happens if no fertilization takes place? You break down the corpus luteum. What happens to the ovarian hormones? Drop. And will I be able to maintain the endometrial lining if I have drop? No. What is going to happen to the endometrial lining? Shedding of the endometrial lining, and this will be taking place between day 1 and day 5 of the cycle. Who will be detecting the drop in the ovarian hormones?
Hypothalamus.
Release what?
It explains it all.
And that's why it's called a cycle.
Oh my God.
It explains it all.
Break for 10, we come back and discuss more about what happens if fertilization did take place.
Taking a break.
Like if you don't release an egg, how to do it?